Welcome back to the Pair Program. I'm your host, Tim Winkler, joined as always by my co-host, Mike Gruen. Mike, today is Cinco de Mayo, which, believe it or not, is one of the top 5 drinking holidays in the U.S., right up there with New Year's Eve and the Super Bowl. So I was researching that they said $600 million is going to be spent on alcohol today. Will you be partaking in any of these Cinco de Mayo festivities?
Probably not. I do find it funny that we make such a big deal about Cinco de Mayo here in the U.S., I think. But anyway, also I'm trying to figure out what the other 5 holidays are. So St. Patrick's Day is obviously one. I'm just
gotta be one.
Struggling with the 5th. But anyway.
4th of July, maybe?
Oh, probably. Good call.
Yeah.
Probably not. I have a lot to do. I assume, will you be partaking?
Yeah, I'm going to open a Corona right after this recording.
It's too early now.
Yeah, for our listeners, it's 11 o'clock on a.m. on the East Coast. No, I think we're actually going to host like some neighbors for dinner, and my wife makes this like key lime pie margarita. It's pretty good.
Oh, yeah, nice. That sounds good.
All right. Well, just a quick preview for our listeners today. We are not going to be discussing, pairing the best beer with tacos. We're going to be diving into a topic that sits at the intersection of public service, national security, and artificial intelligence. And we're asking, how can we reframe federal service as a compelling career path, and how can tools like AI make that path even more impactful? And so to do so, we've got 2 great guests to tackle the topic. First off, we've got Mike Frank, Deputy CTO of the U.S. Navy. Mike brings a blend of experience from the Marine Corps to federal innovation leadership to working with some of the world's largest consulting firms like Accenture and Boston Consulting Group to help drive transformation across one of the largest institutions in the country with the Department of Defense. Mike, thanks for joining us on the pod.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
All right. And then joining alongside Mike is Dr. Jim Liew, founder of an AI consulting firm, SoKat. Jim's also an associate professor of finance at Johns Hopkins Carey Business School. Jim's work at the intersection of AI, blockchain, and finance has not only shaped academic research, but has also informed how government agencies can adopt these tools with purpose. So, Jim, thank you for also joining us on the podcast.
Absolutely. It's an honor to be here.
Awesome. All right. Now, before we dive into the thick of the discussion, we kick things off with a fun segment called Pair Me Up. Here's where we all kind of go around the room and just rattle off 2 things that just belong together. So, Mike Gruen, you're always leading us off. Well, what do you got for us today?
So today we're just going to go with Thursdays in poker. I don't know what it is, but like Thursday night poker has just been a thing for all the way back to college. I currently play in a group. It's funny because with Jim on the call, I play up in Hamden with a bunch of degenerates and a couple professors from Hopkins. So.
Wait a second. I might know these guys.
Yeah. Let's say their names.
We'll save that for the
end. Let's call them out. Let's call these degenerates out.
I mean, that's the name of the club. It's actually, anyway.
I like that. I'm still waiting on my invite, by the way.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. Whenever you're ready to cross the state lines, you let me know. I dig it. Are you? Do you find yourself in the winner's circle often, or how's your win rate?
I do okay. I mean, it's home poker. The money, it's a lot of games of luck, and it's sort of where the money ends at the end of the night.
Right.
But yeah, I do okay.
Cool. Yeah, I've living in Leesburg, it's a quick 30 minutes to get to Charlestown casino. So I'll go up there every once in a while and do a cash game with a neighbor of mine. So nice. I love it, man. It's a good time. Cool. And Thursday, huh? Just kind of like something to look forward to.
Yeah, definitely. I don't know. Yeah. It's just, there's even a book called Thursday Night Poker that I read a long time ago, but there's just something about poker and Thursday nights that go together.
Cool.
Anyway.
Yeah. Good pairing. All right. I'll jump in. I'm going to stick with the Cinco de Mayo theme. I'm going to go with a timeless classic, which is tequila and lime. I just feel like you can't really have one without the other. It's a perfect complement, kind of cuts the burn of the tequila. if it's, throwing back a shot or just kind of sipping on, I love like Clase Azul. So kind of need to have that lime complement by its side. So I'll go with tequila and lime for the pairing. And let's pass it around. So Mike, quick intro and your pairing.
Yeah, absolutely. So Mike Frank, I'm the Deputy CTO for the Department of the Navy. I'm also the cyber portfolio lead for the Marine Innovation Unit in my reserve career. Pairing, I'll say Memorial Day weekend and the NCAA lacrosse tournament. That has been one that is always going back for me, and they got to go together.
That's awesome. Yeah. Any teams you're shouting out?
I think selection Sunday was yesterday, and I don't know the results, so I don't even know who's in right now. But it's been a good season. West Point's been having a good season, and then they dropped one, so I don't know if they made it. I gotta check that after this.
Nice. Yeah, I know it's big in Maryland, so got it quite a bit. Cool. Thanks again for joining us. And Jim, quick intro and your pairing.
Yeah, absolutely. Hi guys, my name is Jim Liew, and I'm the founder of SoKat, named after my two daughters, Sophie and Catherine. And my pairing is vibe coding and the MBA. That's for coming from the business school, MBAs. I think all MBA students, these are business school students, masters in business administrations, are going to be vibe coding. The better term is using the prompt and coding with a prompt. And I think that's going to be a trend that we'll see in the business school. And I'm hoping that it's going to be a trend that we see across the DoD, because I have about 114 students and they all can do it. So, it's a very accessible. And I think this is part of a trend that hopefully we'll discuss a little bit later. But, as AI is already cooked into everything, it's becoming easier and easier and more accessible to the non-programmers, the business school students and business professionals.
Yeah, it's cool. It's been taking off. You hear a lot about it, and it's a great way to get folks into tech and make it a little bit more accessible. Have you done any projects yourself that you're proud of?
Oh no, I give these projects. It's a lot of fun. The first project is always the snake game. You guys, do you remember the snake game?
Mm-hmm.
What is it? Could you code the snake game if I asked you to?
I couldn't. Mike could. I
did.
I tried to code the snake game. I guess that's a better question.
I haven't though.
I'm not a game programming expert at all, right? I'm like a Python hack. But with vibe coding and any of these platforms, we use Windsurf, but there's Cursor. There's many of them. You can basically type in a prompt. I need a snake game. I want to play it, and that's the prompt, and you push enter.
Yeah,
and then it starts coding it up for you. And it's really interesting because once we get the students to do that, we give them a couple of other projects. One of the projects that's more difficult is flying blind. I basically give them a zip folder and I tell them nothing about what's inside there. And they have to figure it out. And the only requirement is add value. And they're like, it's so hard. And so what I do is week by week, we build their skills. And a lot of it is confidence, to be honest with you guys. Mm-hmm. Giving them stuff and, working with them. Their submission on their homework assignments is a 3-minute video and explaining what they did. And, we post it up in the discussions and, people like the ones that they like. And they're also learning from each other. And I'm also learning from them. And then, we go on to stuff like analyzing, earnings reports from 3 companies like Amazon and Meta, Facebook, and NVIDIA. And then, take the point of view that you're a value investor. Warren Buffett's retiring. So you're a value investor. Choose the one stock that, and make a case for that value. And then, now you moved on to team with Kathy Woods and now you're a growth investor, right? So now make a case and, create a website to explain what you're doing. And they can all do it with the vibe coding. So it's a lot of fun.
Cool. Yeah. Vibe coding and MBAs. I like that. We'll probably, lean into some of that on today's discussion, but yeah, let's wrap up the Pair Me Up segment and dive into today's episode. So like I mentioned earlier, today's conversation is all about making federal service more appealing and impactful in the modern era. So we'll explore how advanced tools like AI can empower public servants, help close some of these skills gaps, spark a culture shift across government. A couple of those themes is like how AI access can be used to attract and retain top tech talent. Why public service, even if it's for a short period, can be a very fulfilling opportunity. The culture and operational barriers to innovation in government, and how cross-agency collaboration can help accelerate this type of transformation. So a lot to unpack. Let's jump in, Mike. I'd like to start with you. You've worn many hats: Marine, consultant, now a senior tech leader in the Navy. What drew you back into government service, and how do you think we can make this path more attractive for the next wave of technologists?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, the simple and quick answer is mission, right? I've always been kind of mission driven, mission focused. Obviously in the Marine Corps, that's super easy. It's super clear. After getting off active duty, going to business school, that's where I really had the decision of like, all right, what do I want to go do next, right? Like, what do I want to be when I grow up? And business school is a really interesting time. I mean, it was incredibly valuable for me, and I know a lot of peers who have come off active duty, gone to business school. It's been valuable for them too. But I mean, when you walk in the door, you're immediately getting recruited, day one. Like there are companies there are different industries, consulting, finance are the big ones, investment banking. But there are all kinds of companies coming pitching you, and you barely even have time to catch your breath, let alone know exactly what it is that you want to do. And for folks coming out of government service or military, because we had folks that were coming directly from either Peace Corps or Teach for America or prior government service, everyone in that capacity is kind of like, all right, what the hell is going on, right? And you're trying to figure out what exactly you want to do, what you want to go be. And for me, consulting was a great opportunity. Was a really great way to get a lot of different kind of experiences, work with a lot of different companies. But for me personally, where I spent my time was consulting for the federal government, right? So I was a contractor. I worked with Department of Energy. I worked with Department of State. Worked with a lot of my time was with Department of Defense, but kind of all over the place. And that for me was giving me the ability to scratch the mission itch while still being in the private sector and still kind of experiencing what I needed to on that side and kind of gain that. But to answer your question of like, why did I come back? Why did I join federal service as a GS employee? That really, again, came down to mission and timing. So, as anyone who's been a contractor or anyone who's been a federal employee has seen, we need both. Absolutely. Both play a critical point, part in the mission. But there are differences. There is a limit to what you can affect as a contractor. And a limit to kind of what you're able to accomplish as a federal employee. So like I said, it's symbiotic. We do need both. But for me, after spending so long as a federal contractor supporting the federal government from the private sector side, I did want to step onto the other side and have more of a chance to impact directly. The other piece of it is timing. I mean, right now we are in I'll call it a little bit of a renaissance in kind of defense, defense acquisition, defense, the defense industrial base expansion. And so there's a lot of private capital rolling into the defense industry right now, which is spurring a lot of innovation, which, like I said, is a really critical time given, what we're seeing on the geopolitical landscape. So as we shift to the Pacific, we've got various folks who have predictions on, when things may happen in the Indo-PACOM AOR. But really, what we all agree on is that the next couple of years are very important. Regardless of what happens, the next couple of years and our buildup is very, very important, which again, was the main driver behind my timing on why I came in now.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's interesting too. It's like, kind of growing up in DC, and having a lot of friends or family that have, worked in federal services, oftentimes it's kind of looked at as like, that's it, you're going to be in the service for, 30, 40 years. But there's another angle here of looking at it, even if it's just as a rotational kind of opportunity to where, you can kind of get some of that experience sitting in, a seat of somebody that's in customer end user, and then taking that over to industry, and using that to your advantage. And I think you're right in the sense of timing, where we talk about it, all the time on the podcast is, this kind of renaissance. And it's very easy to point out, from the global politics, happening today of like defense tech and a push for modernization and doing it in a more rapid and agile fashion. So we're seeing, a new peaked interest in getting involved and getting behind like that mission. So I'm glad that you kind of pointed it out, and it's cool to get that perspective of somebody who's jumped from consulting, to work directly with federal services. Jim, I'd love your perspective on this topic, given you're a professor. You work closely with students and early career professionals. Are you seeing a shift in, either how they view federal service, in mission aligned roles like national security or defense tech?
Yeah, first off, Mike, thank you for your service. And I think you have an amazing background, coming from some of these elite consulting firms, and then also going and then, working inside the government. So, all the angles. So these guys come up to you, you've been in their role, right? And, you know what they're all about, right? And I think that's just gives you such a great perspective for the role that you're trying to do, which ultimately you have to kind of make some changes there, right? People in Johns Hopkins, we see a lot of people transitioning in from one side to the other side. And a lot of times they're trying to reinvent themselves. Some people will go to, the public services. Some people go to healthcare. Some people want to go to Wall Street and so forth. But it feels like most of them want a bigger challenge. So they may be mid-office, back office, earlier in their career. Now they want to get out, to the front office. We see that. I think what's important is that because we're located sort of in the DC area, we get a lot of people, some military, some not. I mean, I've taught students in most of the different agencies, right? And whether they're working part-time or full-time, or they get a job and they move on. So yeah, I think it's great. Our location is wonderful. And then, when I go out there and talk to people in DC, I meet a lot of people who are alums, right, from Johns Hopkins, and they talk about their time here, which is great. On the DoD side and the intelligence side, I know a few, right, and I think there's a lot of guys, some of them who start cyber companies and government contracting companies, very successful in this area. So I think all the universities have their kind of star entrepreneurs coming out that do government contracting work very successfully. And what's really nice is they go back and they support their university, right? So it's a very good ecosystem, and there's a lot of real great opportunities just around the Beltway.
Yeah, I'm glad you point out like the location thing. It's something that I've seen our locale, our ecosystem kind of suffer from over the years, is breeding great talent, but then losing those folks to, they want to go to Silicon Valley, they want to go, different parts of the country, but making more of an intentional push to keep that talent here and encourage them to get involved, with federal services, or even local, startups that might be innovating, on behalf of, or building products that will eventually, be acquired by the defense ecosystem. Trying to encourage more folks to, be more in this setting. And I think that is part of this push of return to office too. You're seeing a little bit less fully remote, and looking for folks to come back into a setting to innovate and be a part of that ecosystem. So, I wanted to, also make this analogy, because I'm curious on how you kind of vocalize this, Mike. This working. Most folks that have worked within a very large organization, they know what it can feel like to not know like how your efforts are making an impact. It's kind of like this small fish in a big pond scenario. How can like personal satisfaction and impact be better communicated across like the federal government?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great point, right? I mean, I think anybody coming from a smaller organization or a startup, you get used to this kind of like immediate feedback loop where, you take an action and you see results, and that can come in the form of, you know, personnel and how your team is operating, or it can come in the form of, just revenue, whatever that is. Yeah, to your point, in larger organizations, that is much less the case. I usually liken it to a carrier, right? An aircraft carrier, to turn an aircraft carrier, it takes a lot of effort. And usually you're only turning it, a couple degrees at a time. These aren't major turns. So when we talk about, making change or even, influencing change in the federal government, we're talking about really small things, which, zoomed out, you may say, well, what's the point, or kind of like what impact has that actually had? But I think the longer that you're there or the closer that you are to it, you kind of understand that, you can achieve change, you can achieve, positive improvement or excellence or whatever you're striving for in pockets that will then, if you start to stack those, if you start to just like keep putting those in the hopper, it expands, right? I think about culture as kind of the last, the average of your last 1,000 experiences, and that can be on an individual basis or an organizational basis. And so in order to kind of change that average, you need a lot of new experiences coming in, right? Like you need a lot of wins, you need to put a lot of things on the board. And that's how I think about it for, for large organizations, whether that be giant companies that you're working for, or more specifically the federal government. Because, there are a lot of wins. We experience wins all the time. And that's by attaching yourselves to those and hopefully, publicizing those as much as possible, you keep the motivation up. And then the more of those that happen, it's this kind of virtuous cycle where the more of those that happen, ultimately, culture does start to shift very slightly, even if it is just a couple degrees at a time.
Yeah, it's a good take. Appreciate that perspective. Like the 1,000 things combined, get that cumulative point of view. Jim, during our discovery call, you were very passionate about using AI as a tool to empower, public servants. And what's your take on how AI can, practically support federal employees, and how you envision AI serving as an outlet to help attract and recruit a new wave of talent to join federal services?
Yeah, well, and earlier we had this conversation. I think the U.S. is ahead, but not that far ahead, according to Jensen Huang, right? And what my idea was, we have all these wonderful technology companies in Silicon Valley with the most cutting edge technology, including XAI. We should ask Elon, hey, give a copy of, your strongest Grok model to every Fed who's serving, across all the agencies. And, not just him, but we ask OpenAI and we ask Anthropic. We ask all of them, let's put this in the fingertips of the people who are using it to solve problems for, the American taxpayer and, keeping us safe. And what I think would happen, at least this is what happens in the classroom, is people start to see where the edge is, how far you can push this technology, how valuable is it really? And then it's not, so obviously you can't do everything with AI, right? And there's a lot of hype. But what's really fascinating and interesting is that as you keep using this technology to try to solve real world problems, the AI only gets better. So last year you may be struggling with this, right? Hey, I want to pick stocks with AI, but it's not very good at, reading an earnings announcement or parsing through a 10K. But then you just wait like 9 months, and then all of a sudden, it can compare like three different stocks together. Whereas like 6 months ago, a year ago, it couldn't do that, right? It would hallucinate. And what's important is that a lot of people sort of miss this point. The whole AI thing, it's kind of like tinkering. So whoever tinkers the most and shares that moves ahead. So I think that's kind of lost. And people are like, oh, AI, I'll never understand AI. I'll never understand AI. And that's exactly the experience in the first class. I say, hey, we're going to vibe code. And they're like, oh, no, professor, I can't code. I'm not a Python coder. I can't do that. I'm like, okay, there's a new coding language. It's called English. Can you speak English? I'm like, oh, yeah, I can do that, professor. And then, so you start building some confidence. You put these tools in their hands, And then they get excited. They're like, oh, do I only have to use Windsurf? I'm like, no, use Cursor. Here's Google, LM. Use that, it's free. And so then they start searching around and they say, wow, this is really interesting. But I think what's important is to support their development, right? So empower them, challenge our Silicon Valley friends, right? And then, challenge the Ivory Tower as well, but put it in their hands and let them, because they're on the front lines, right? They know what the problem is. And if they start, breaking through and getting their wins, as sort of Mike said, right? Getting a bunch of wins, have them share that. Share it across, DoD, share it across government and say, I was doing X, Y, Z, and I just did this and it opened this up and look at this. This is my key performance indicator. It used to take me months and, weeks or whatever. Now I can do it in days or minutes or seconds, right? And so how did you get there? Well, here's some of the prompts I use. So highlight that across government and share that, openly to the extent that you could share that. But I definitely think in empowering everybody with these wonderful tools. And the other thing is, these tools are only going to get better. So when you couldn't do 3 months ago, you absolutely can do after the next innovation, the next wave, right? And I think that's what's important to realize. And it's very challenging, right? I'm trying to teach this stuff. I'm trying to stay ahead of it and learn as much as I can and then go in the classroom and regurgitate it and provide resources. But it is really exciting and fun. And if you want to be challenged, oh my goodness, right? There's so many problems in the government that you could solve with this stuff. So I think empowering our workforce, I'll give you one anecdotal example. I had a friend of mine visit me from Oklahoma. We grew up together in Oklahoma. He had a job site in Maine. He was driving through and I said, hey, Shane, come hang out with me. And so he sat into my class. He didn't go to college. He graduated from high school and, he works sort of blue collar jobs. And I said, hey, Shane, come over here. I'm going to teach you how to vibe code. And he's like, oh, I don't know how to. Same exact response, right? I'm like, Shane, come on, just sit here, create the snake game. And he did. He was so excited about it. He started, putting different faces on the snakes. And he did Pong. And I said, cross the two. And then he did. Okay. So what's interesting, the snake game code is there. Pong's code is out there on the internet, but crossing the two is not there. So that's where the AI is getting creative. But what I was thinking while he was doing this is, oh my goodness, this American dream that we all are, it's usually immigrants. Like my parents immigrated over here and everybody comes to the United States to sort of live the American dream. But what if we took the people in America, like my friend Shane, right? He's a really smart guy, but he's not in such smart places, right? His talent is not really being used, but you start giving them these AI tools. Every one of us knows one friend who's like super smart, who's in somewhere, probably not utilizing their potential, right? But imagine you brought like one in, come solve this problem for the DoD or solve this problem for HHS or whatever it is. Here's some tools. And if everybody did that with one of their friends that they know are talented, we could have the American Dream 2.0, which is basically, taking an American in America, a really smart guy, not in a smart place, and empower them, encourage them to come in. I think that could be, really interesting. And, I'm kind of calling it the American Dream 2.0. And I think this is what a lot of, people felt like they got left out on, right? But, I don't know. What do you guys thought?
Well, Mike, I'm curious to hear it from the inside, right? You're a big advocate for, agile, tech adoption by the DoD and it's apparent too, like the Navy is, we would say, is the forefront driving a lot of this change. We actually hosted Justin Finelli on a topic not long ago about driving more tech modernization and doing it through different creative outlets like structured piloting. How do you kind of see AI playing a role in empowering your teams within the Navy, and what are some of those hurdles to getting this AI access into the hands of the public servants?
Yeah, I love what Jim is doing. I love the way he was talking about kind of, there is this just hesitation, intimidation, you can say, even for folks who, haven't really delved into kind of what the capabilities are yet. And, that barrier is high. That barrier to entry is seemingly high, I should say, because it's actually not, right? And Jim, I think you've probably seen this with your students and everybody that you've kind of brought into the fold to say, look, it's not as hard as you may think. I mean, we are in a unprecedented time in the federal government right now in terms of kind of shifting numbers of personnel, budgets, kind of uncertainty for the federal workforce. And so, what I'd say is that there has never been a more kind of important time where we're going to need to upskill folks really quickly. And it just happens to be at the time where, AI is making, legendary strides kind of every couple months here. So I think we're seeing kind of this convergence that, wasn't intentionally planned out, but we are here now and we've got an opportunity. So, for us in the Department of the Navy, what we're really focused on is one, piloting a bunch of different tools. So looking at different models that we can use, different ways that we can get them into the department. Two, pushing out policy on, from the departmental level on, what models can be used for what types of use cases, in what scenarios, how we deal with the classification issues, how we deal with the, classification by aggregation issues that arise when you start pulling all this data together. But outside of that, there are tons of use cases where we see this being an immediate increase to our ability to execute the mission, both, back office, front office, edge use cases. There are a lot of ways where we're going to need to, like I said, upskill our workforce, because as we're looking to decrease the population of federal employees by anywhere from 8 to 10%, we've got folks that are leaving through the deferred resignation program, taking, voluntary early retirement, things like that, where, we are dealing with a reduced workforce. On top of that, business services contracts are getting cut. So essentially, we have fewer resources, both internal federal employees and external contractors, to do the things that we need to do. So what's the answer, right? We need to turn to technology. We need to turn to the tools that, Jim is teaching to his students now, and getting a generation of folks more familiar with how to use them to do more with less is really what it comes down to.
And Mike, I think one thing I wanted to touch on that or rather you touched on a little bit, is with those people leaving, I think AI is a great opportunity for that institutional knowledge, that tribal knowledge, right? Like that's a good place for this stuff to reside and be, as people transition out, that's always the hardest part, is that knowledge transition. And then one thing both of you were sort of talking about in terms of like, there's this intimidation factor, right? Like, hey, I don't want to use it. I'm not that person, whatever. One of the things I've seen, and I'm curious how you deal with it, is the AI gave me the wrong answer. It doesn't know what it's talking about, or it gave me this thing, and it's going to be more work for me to fix it than to just do it myself. I'm curious how you guys tackle that, because I think it's the other side of the coin of like the people who are like, I know I don't want to do this because it seems like it's more work, and I'm just curious how you guys tackle sort of helping people through that, over that hurdle.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to hear Jim's answer, but I mean, I'll just touch on it real quick from the DoD point of view. I think like if you think about the normal technology adoption scale, the government's always kind of a little bit behind, right? So if the general population is maybe in the early adopters, we're still in the kind of visionaries or, that far left piece. And, I think we are going to continue to see kind of pushback if there is no traceability. So traceability is huge in terms of the models that we're using. We're going to see pushback in terms of any kind of operational use cases, but those business use cases, those back office use cases, I think are areas where we can really start to build trust and confidence in the models to the point where senior leaders are more comfortable using it in, let's say, expanded use cases.
Yeah, that's a great point. Just to push that further, Mike, I think that's a right way to do it, right? So for example, like most agencies has an HR department, they have travel, right? I'm sure when you go off and travel, you have to get your receipts and so forth. But you go after these things that most businesses struggle with. At Johns Hopkins, we have the same thing. We have a horrible, I don't even want to go anywhere and try to get expenses. It's so painful to stick into that system. I'd rather get my phone and take a couple of pictures of my receipts and be done with it, right?
Right.
Like, these simple things that everyone's struggling with, like, at Johns Hopkins, if we're hiring, then, you have to look at the resume and see if there's a fit. But that's something that happens, I guess, in every agency, right? Is this candidate fit for this? How do these people sort of have a career, and how do they project? How do they sort of get career advice in a nice way, right? So, in school, in a typical way, we manually look through these resumes, right? And, we read the job description, we read the resume, right? But how can you use an AI to help you further match that? But you can do it even more than that. How can the AI say, hey, you're liking one or two of these skills? If you got that, you could probably have a good chance of hitting this job with some probability, right? Now, if you want to hit that other job with a higher salary, you can do X, Y, Z, right? And the other thing that I think is also very interesting, and I was playing around with the AI on the way to school, down in DC, and I have to go sit and moderate this panel discussion. And I just hit the ChatGPT and the voice, and I said, hey, I got to do this panel discussion. This is my intro. How am I doing? And the AI gave me really good suggestions. They're like, oh, you're talking too fast. Before an important word, stop and pause. And I was like, whoa, this is great. I just have this voice coach now. I was going to hire one. I don't need to, right? So what's happening is as I'm interacting with it, I'm also testing what can I get out of it, right? And it's so much easier. I don't know any voice coaches. I don't have that network. So I ask it a lot of different things just to test it out. But the other thing is, I think career advice. So imagine if I'm not going to join the Navy, but I suppose I was really young and I joined the Navy and I'm butting heads with everybody and I want some career advice. What am I doing right? What am I doing wrong? I mean, I'm thinking about my career in Wall Street, right? When I first got there, I didn't know what was going on. I didn't know how to behave. I wish I had an AI to sort of say, hey, don't go bother your boss about X, Y, Z. You should talk to HR or whatever it is, just so that, you have another voice there to help you along, right? And maybe you're a colonel and you want to become a general, right? How do you become a general or whatever? How do you take your career to that next stage? Well, what's going to happen? Maybe it's telling you some organizations to join, and it's probably telling you to expand your network. At a certain level, I think the skills that took you to a particular level in your career, the skills changed to the next level, right? And so just to understand that whole path and, get it some advice. But I maybe I'm embarrassed. I don't want to go tell everybody, all my colleagues, I'm trying to improve my, these different types of skills, right? And I think that, I think there's some advantages to that. My wife, who's the CEO of SoKat, she says, before you do any business, go interact with AI and see if you're not wasting your time, right? Yeah. It's interesting because, you can sort of, it's a really great sounding board. Because I think one of the things that is in there that we haven't really pushed hard enough is all the best practices. Now we know coding best practices are in there, right? So we know the AI can code better than the majority of coders, probably in the top 3-5%, right? So we know that. But I also think like in terms of running businesses, it gives us pretty good ideas on the operational side in terms of our careers, right? In terms of some relationships. Now, you can't go there and blindly believe everything it tells you, right? And you have to use your own judgment and say, hey, does this make sense? Does it not make sense? And then talk to people about it. But it has a lot of really good best practices. And I think that's what's really interesting about this, not only in coding, but, how do you run an organization? How do you think about even the cybersecurity? One project I'll tell you guys a little bit about is we're trying to modernize COBOL code, modern day languages, right? And the AI does a really good job of translating the code. But the more we think about it, COBOL is basically written for business school people who are not coders to move some kind of business process along. Okay, and the reason why it gets all messed up is contractors get in there generations after generations after generations, and they kind of make it more difficult because it's easy to make code more difficult. You just don't comment it, or you use terms that are not consistent, right? So you, the coder, knows it, but maybe somebody who's doing the processing down the line, they don't. But that kind of gives you, it justifies, it makes your job defendable. Good for you, but not good for the agency, right? And so, how do you think about that? How do you use AI to understand the business logic first? And do you have to go through and convert all this code, or can you create it very elegantly this way? And, those are the things I think are really interesting. And because at the end of the day, I get a sense, this sort of, goes back to what Mike was saying, what's the mission? Yeah. The mission is usually pretty simple. So how do we do this to the mission, right? And we need to kind of unravel this complexity that we've sort of put in there as consultants over generations, right? To defend, our existence and our jobs. We got to kind of rethink that. And, I think, unfortunately, that type of stuff not only exists in government agencies, but it exists in financial institutions and exists, quite pretty much everywhere where, people over time have been worried about their job and their job safety and so forth, right? So they're insulating themselves in a way that is not productive, for the organization, ultimately. So I don't know.
I think there's another reason for that as well, which is usually speed, right? Like whenever you're trying to get something done, the first thing you jettison is the documentation. The second thing you jettison is the testing. Which then you're just hurting future version of yourself or whoever's going to have to inherit the code or whatever. But yeah, it's the same problems. And I think that's another area where AI can really also help, is just sort of maintaining that documentation, maintaining that testing, and then stuff like that. But yeah.
Yeah. What do you guys think of, I'll just throw this out there. What do you think about this whole digital twin? So I was at the, NVIDIA conference, and digital twins for manufacturing and, creating stuff is all over there. It's, NVIDIA has everything that they do is first a digital twin. I mean, imagine we had a digital twin of all the government. And so then basically we can go in there and change and see if it works, right? And if it works, then we're like, hey, we'll test it all out. And if it works, then we try to push it across government. But setting up a digital twin, we're really going to hurt anything, right? Arguably, but we can play around with simulations and say, okay, what if we did this, this, and this? What if we converted COBOL this way? Or what if we try that? And had lots of, simulations there. And then we say, hey, this really works. All we have to do is X, Y, Z. So now let's go implement that, right? I'm just curious, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, we see it quite a bit. It's actually a topic that we're crafting around is digital twins. But if you put it into the scenario of defense, I think it's super relevant and apparent to have modeling and simulation done on behalf of the warfighter, right? So that we can try to understand, what are the impacts before, just putting it directly into their hands and hoping for the best. So we see it as a huge use case across defense. Mike, are you have any vision into, modeling simulation, digital twins, and how that's impacting some of your all's projects?
Yeah, 100%. Modeling and sim is a huge part of what we're doing right now. And a huge use case for kind of different companies that are coming at us with emerging, models and capabilities. But from a digital twin perspective, I mean, we've been doing this for some time now, just around our major platforms. So, you think an F-35, right? And a digital twin of an F-35 or any of our major ships or any of our airframe platforms, the ability to do predictive maintenance on kind of what we're seeing and what we're pulling, from the telemetry data from the platforms themselves is huge. And so, that's another kind of definition of a digital twin, but it's something that, we have been trying to really get in place now for a while. But now with the increases in just computational capabilities and models, we are able to do a lot more, which has been fantastic.
Yeah. I wanted to ask one more question, just bringing it back into, some of the appeal of working in federal services before we kind of wrap. Mike, I'm curious if have you picked up on any sort of shift around like interagency collaboration, where you're maybe, because we need to kind of like pull on what's working and kind of apply that to, across the board. Are you seeing more openness to this? And I don't know if there was like this preconceived, like, the Army's doing this one thing, they don't want to expand on it because it's kind of their thing. Is there any shift in that and more of like this encouragement across the board of like, we're in this together and the mission is to kind of, if it's a race against China, if the Army's figuring something out, it needs to be shared over here. Maybe a little insight onto that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you used to always see the signs, go Army beat Navy or go Navy beat Army. Now it's all go Navy beat China, go Army beat China. As far as that goes, yeah, for sure. No, but I mean, I think it's always been kind of tongue-in-cheek competition. A lot of times, I think everyone in the building gets it, right? We're all on the same team. Everybody wants to work together. But to your point, I would say now more than ever, there is a necessity for us to work together and for us to, copy from each other, right? We don't have the same resources that we did before for everyone to go off and build things on their own. We need to replicate as much as possible. We need to have joint programs. We need to, in order to save resources. So we need to, copy and paste wherever possible. But the other aspect of that is, when I say joint programs, I don't just mean from a funding perspective, but I mean from an interoperability perspective. When we talk about a fight in the Indo-PACOM or just great power competition in general, these new capabilities that we are trying to bring into the department, they are at the joint level. They need to operate at a joint level. And when we think about a kill web, it is no one specific service. It is no one specific domain that is going to have an entire kind of decision cycle across the kill web. It is going to be all domain, all services, all departments that have components and have pieces of it. And so the only way you can build solutions like that is by working together. So, for us at Department of the Navy, we are working super close with the Department of the Army, Department of the Air Force to make sure that we are tied in lockstep with what they're building out. When we think about space capabilities, when we think about cyber capabilities, all of this, it needs to work together and we need to be talking. So yeah, definitely. I think there's been kind of an increase in that.
Cool. Yeah, I think it's a good point to kind of wrap on. We're going to, kind of put a bow on this conversation and transition to a final segment. This is going to be just fun, fast answers. Try not to overthink it. We call it the 5-second scramble. Mike, you could lead things off with Jim, and then I'll kind of close with rapid fire with Mike.
Sounds good. All right. If SoKat were an animal, what animal would it be?
Oh my goodness. Have you ever seen that like lion where it's just sitting there and all these hyenas are trying to bite his butt,
Yes.
That's us. Horrible at marketing, but we can, eat one of those hyenas in 2 seconds and everyone's like bullshitting AI, they're about sitting there and waiting. And then, and then we turn our head, right? No, I'm just kind of half joking, but, we think we're pretty darn good at AI and, we want to go in there and do the really challenging stuff, right? My team, it's interesting. I mean, we didn't cover this too much. I mean, how do you attract the most talented people? You go after the hardest problem. And so, we say we want to look at the hardest problems across any agency. And then we want to figure it out because we think we can rally the talent. A lot of them come from Hopkins, they graduate and they're coming from different places. But, we're always trying to go after that because it's fun and interesting and it's challenging. And sometimes when we start the engagement, we're not quite sure if we can do it. But most of the things, the more you sit there and talk about it and you talk with the customer, the client, right? You start to unravel what's happening and the solutions are right there. But you need to kind of, work together. So we think of ourselves as, we want to go after those challenging things. So it's that lion sitting there getting attacked by the hyena. I think that's
cool. All right. What's your favorite part of the culture at SoKat?
We barbell this. Okay. So we get a very senior person like myself. I'm old, right? And we surround ourselves with really junior young people, uber talented. I mean, way smarter than I was when I was that age, right? And then we mentor them and we try to show them, how to present, how to communicate. And we always push them a little bit further than we think they should be. So for example, they'll be in there presenting to very senior, maybe there's an SES in there, maybe there's GS 14, 15 in there, right? And so we want to give them a little bit of a challenge for themselves to present. If you're very technical, you probably didn't have a lot of time presenting, right? And so, and also we have a culture of really encouraging people to build their skill set. So if they don't know anything about the cloud, we'll give them, some videos to watch, and we'll give them time to develop that skill set. And we really want to invest in our engineers. And most of the times, I mean, knock on wood, but all our engineers who've left SoKat have always left for much higher pay, which is totally okay with us, right? We're like, hey, there's no way we can match that. Amazon is giving you 3 times. This is government contracting. Go, let's stay in touch, right? And I think that's part of the fun because, You get in, you train up some people, they go off, but also, AI is hot. So if they can get in and gets a couple of reps on these things, right? I mean, then everybody is poaching them away, which, that makes me happy. I'm like the part of being the professor. I'm like, all right. And then we'll hire some more, young people to train them up. So that's our culture.
Cool. What's the most common advice you give to students?
Oh, that's easy. The most common advice is that you can do this. They're like, I don't think I can do this, professor. I'm like, you're way smart. You can do this, but you need to encourage them, right? And a lot of people, they have a lot of doubt. I think human beings have a lot of self-doubt. So I'm there to like preach to them. Yes, you can do this. Just give it a shot. And, by and large, you just have to put in the work and they can do it.
Cool. What was your first car?
Oh, no. My cars now is so embarrassing. It was a Chevy Chevette.
Nice. Nice.
Like, professors, come on, guys. No
Love it.
What's a surprising hobby of yours?
What's a surprising hobby? I think I play way too much chess, like, by my, on your mobile phone against human beings, of course, not against AI that would crush me, but it's fun.
What's a charity or a corporate charity or cause that is near and dear to you?
Because I'm Korean American, and both my parents were professors. They both passed. But there's this Korean American storybook collection, which is kind of cool. They just go around and they interview Korean Americans who came over here, and just hearing their life stories. It's a lot of fun, and I'm surprised that the Korean culture is so mainstream. Mm-hmm. I have friends who tell me about kimchi and they speak Korean better than me. And
nice. What was your favorite toy growing up?
My favorite toy? Probably my BB gun until I almost shot my eye out.
Nice. That's a great answer.
That's a great one. And last one, what's something you enjoy doing but are very bad at?
Something that I enjoy doing but I'm very bad at? I'm trying to keep up with my kids. My daughter, like, so much more athletic than me. It's sad. I used to be able to run in her. And she's a sophomore in high school, and she plays field hockey. And now I try to race her. I can't keep up. It's like sad. I mean, what happened?
I remember when my youngest started beating me in races, and I was like, what happened?
Yeah, you win. Good stuff. Awesome.
Nice. All right, well done.
All right, Mike, you up?
Yeah.
What is one leadership trait you think is underrated in federal service?
I don't know if it's underrated, but authenticity, I would say, and just the ability to not try to project or not try to be a leader that you think people, want to hear from, but just be yourself, because that ultimately shines through and, people respond.
Yeah, well said. If you could instantly fix one government tech challenge, what would it be?
Oh, man.
How much time do you have?
Yeah. How much time do you got? One government tech challenge, instantly fix. Let's say ATOs. So authority to operate. So the ability for companies to get approval to operate on government systems and networks. We're making a lot of progress there, and it's improving. But if we could just get that solved right away, that would be awesome.
That's huge. What's the most impactful tech trend that you're tracking right now?
Tech trend, I'd say in the defense space, probably around sensing and kind of alt PNT. So when we think about, alternative ways that we can navigate without using, GPS and others, and coming up with new technology around that, we're seeing a lot of companies that are coming to us with capabilities that are just, they're mind blowing. It's awesome, and we need it.
That's cool. What's one thing you wish more people understood about working in the Navy?
I'd say probably your ability to impact things. We alluded to this earlier, but I feel like people, have, with large organizations, the Navy in particular, you have this perception that you can't really impact things. But if you focus on your sphere of influence and the pockets of people that you're around, you can see positive change and you can impact change.
Cool. What's a charity or corporate philanthropy that's near and dear to you?
Yeah, so I'm on the board of the Hearing Loss Association of America. And, it does what it sounds like. It provides support and services to people with hearing loss. I'm an artillery Marine. I've got a lot of folks that I work with that have hearing loss. I've got hearing loss. I've got hearing loss in my family. And so, to be able to provide and give back a little bit there is great.
Cool. What's your go-to road trip snack?
Ooh. The fiery Cheetos.
Oh, solid. Yeah.
Yeah.
What's the best concert you've ever attended?
Billy Joel in the Philippines.
Wow.
And I was stationed out in Okinawa, and me and a couple other lieutenants went over to Manila and saw Billy Joel concert there. Pretty awesome.
It's a flex. That's a great answer. What's the first job that you ever had?
Construction. So we were a subcontractor, but it was a shelving company. We would go on to commercial construction sites and install, industrial shelves. That was awesome. Loved it.
Cool. What's a hobby or pastime that you've picked up in the last 5 years?
So my wife got real into needle pointing during the pandemic, and I tried getting into that a little bit. It hasn't fully stuck, but really, my hobby of the last, couple of years has been babies. So that I don't have to use for anything else. But yeah, I know
it's a full-time hobby. And last one, what was your dream job as a kid?
Like Jim, had the BB gun, was running around the backyard, Nerf guns, little knives and stuff. So, I was always wearing camo and stuff like that. So probably Marine.
Living it out. So yeah, good for you. Awesome. Well, I wanted to thank you both for sharing your insights on, this idea of building a stronger and smarter public sector. If you've ever considered a role in federal service or wondered how AI might change how our government operates, you just kind of got a front row seat to it here on this episode. So thank you both for your time and your service. And then thanks for joining us on the podcast.
Thank you very much.
This is awesome. Thank you very much.